Be seated. The readings today are filled with such dramatic and commanding imagery around the sea, the deep, and the storm. The Israelites considered the sea to be chaos, and they were afraid of the sea. They didn't venture far out on the ocean. It was inhabited by monsters and creatures that would grab you and drag you down to the depths. The sea reminded the Israelites of the chaos that existed before God began the creation. And the gospel reading, of course, is about the disciples in a little boat on the Sea of Galilee, and a storm arises and they're tossed about, and Jesus is just asleep in the stern, like he doesn't have a care in the world. And of course the disciples get all panicked and worked up, and you don't care about us, and you're abandoning us, and blah, blah, blah. And then Jesus wakes up, and with one word says, "Peace, be still," and the sea is calm. The disciples are amazed. "Who is this?" they ask. Good question. That even the sea and the wind obey him. Well, we're in the middle of a storm today. Lord knows we're in the middle of a storm. Lord knows we're in the middle of chaos. Our government is working in too many different directions and not always for the good of the people. Children are being separated from their parents. We have leadership that seems to be serving the wealthy and ignoring the poor. Tax cuts that are promised as a great benefit that will disappear in 2 years. Oh yes, we're in the middle of a storm, a big storm. But I don't want to talk about the storm right now. I want to talk about a completely different topic. I want to talk about our place in the storm. So I'm going to speak today about martyrdom and what it means to be a martyr. Now, how I'm going to describe martyrdom may come as a surprise for you, and you may be further surprised to learn that you are already a martyr. The word martyr is a Greek word that simply means witness, like a witness in a courtroom testifying to what he saw or she heard or said or did. A martyr is simply a witness. At baptism, every Christian becomes a martyr. Every person who comes to this cathedral, even in the most casual way, is not here without a purpose. Everybody who comes here wants to touch the divine in whatever way they understand, however they are able. We're all here today because we want to touch that which is divine in the midst of the storms of our life. Baptized or not, we are all martyrs in different ways and to different degrees. And I say that with confidence because Jesus said earlier in Mark's gospel, "Whoever is not against us is for us." So if you're not against Jesus, then you're for at least what Jesus stands for. And you're here today. That's about as broad a greeting and hospitableness as we can imagine. we can be assured that at least most, if not all of us, who are gathered here today in this great cathedral are martyrs to some degree or other in the sight of God and in the sight of humanity, in the sight of this country. Are you beginning to worry, now that I've called all of us martyrs, are you beginning to worry that I'm going to tell you that now you have to go out these doors and die for some noble cause or other? Don't think that to be a martyr you must become a Christian and then promptly be killed for it. I beg you to indulge me just a little bit longer. For you see, there are different kinds of witness. Three different kinds of martyrdom, three to be more specific. You can be a martyr in word and deed. You can be a martyr by what you say and how you say it and what you do. Or you can be a martyr in deed but not in word. You can be a martyr in action but not by what you say. And thirdly, you can be a martyr through word but not deed, that is, by what you say but not by your action. First, there are martyrs in word and deed, both by what they proclaimed and what they did, like St. Peter, or St. Paul, or Joan of Arc, or Dietrich Bonhoeffer, or Martin Luther King, all of whom professed a faith bravely and boldly in the face of the world that opposed them, and they were killed for it. They were martyrs in word and in deed. This is probably the smallest category of martyrdom. It is important, but by the numbers, if you will, it is not the commanding image of what being a martyr means, though at least for those who are baptized, it means we have to be willing, at least, to die for what we proclaim and the Lord we follow. Sometimes witnessing to a great faith or a great truth may get you killed, like Martin Luther King or Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Sometimes proclaiming and witnessing to a great principle may be the end of you, like Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi. Being a martyr in word and deed, however, is not the only way to be a martyr. There are also martyrs in action but not in word. This is a little bit more difficult and esoteric to understand. In the gospel story of Jesus' birth, there's the evil king, Herod, who orders the death of every child under 2 in his kingdom. These martyrs, and indeed they are martyrs, are called the holy innocents, and indeed, that since they were too young to speak, though they were killed, not knowing why, not understanding the evil that inhabits this world, not even being able to proclaim whatever truth they wish to speak to. Like Trayvon Martin, who I count as a martyr, and so many others who died or were lynched, silent victims to racism, silent victims to violence and hatred, silent victims, be they young, be they old, be they known or unknown. There are so many martyrs in this nation. who are silent and yet witness to the violence the gospel seeks to end. Oh, well, what about the 240 children who are separated from their parents and are now at a youth detention center or shelter here in Manhattan? They are cruelly separated from their parents by the border on orders of our president. These child martyrs cannot speak, and yet they cry for mercy and justice in their witness against injustice. It's a crime to separate children from their parents in that way. It's too reminiscent of other evils and other evil times. Even in our own nation, it's too reminiscent of the Japanese incarceration in this nation during the Second World War. Why doesn't our president himself come to the detention center here in New York or any of the other centers that have children and see for himself what his erratic and inconsistent policies mean for human lives, instead of sending his wife with a message on the back of her coat that says, "Don't ask me, I don't care"? It's horrible. You see, a martyr, you and I, Christian or not, are called to witness against injustice. We're called to witness, Christian or not, against lack of mercy in the world that we live in. Followers of Jesus are bound to witness by the vows they have made at their baptism, that we've made at our baptism, promising to work for justice and peace and for preserving the dignity of every human being. How in the world is separating children from their parents and then shipping them thousands of miles away, no matter how pleasant the surroundings, how in the world does that preserve human dignity? It mocks human dignity. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you speak on behalf of those who suffer injustice or persecution, then you speak on their behalf. And you speak of mercy and justice and dignity just as Jesus did. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me." We cannot delay any longer in restoring these children to their parents. It is you and I, as martyrs to the truth and love and mercy of Jesus Christ, to speak for them, and that must be our witness. Finally, there are martyrs, witnesses in word but not deed, witnesses in what is said but not necessarily in what is done. For example, John, the evangelist John, who lived a long life and died at 90-some years old on Patmos. More than likely, this is the category of martyrdom that most of us are called to be in. Martyrs in word, by what we profess, by what we claim, by our baptismal vows, by being here today. Martyrs in word, but not necessarily in deed. This category includes St. John the Divine, and so many others. People like you and me, the ordinary folk of Christendom. There are millions of people who are called to profess a faith in that command, a faith that commands us to stand up for what is peaceful and merciful and just and right. Martyrs in word but not deed are those who vote with their lives for the future. and not to use their feet to move into the past. One might, for example, how would one vote for this? One might join the Me Too movement to witness against sexual predation and violence. Perhaps by observing Gay Pride Week, which begins today, as signs of God's embracing kingdom of justice and inclusion and mercy in the midst of the sinfulness and injustices and prejudices and oppressions in this world. Have you said and done anything in this regard? You're here today. What are you going to say when you leave here? What are you going to do? Have you witnessed against sexual predation? Have you witnessed against racial or gender violence or prejudice? Have you witnessed against oppression and prejudice of gays and lesbians and bisexuals and transgendered people? There's room in God's heart for every person. It is we who deny that, not God. This is Gay Pride Week. Our president chose not to even mention Gay Pride Week. Instead, he has proclaimed this coming week to be Promote Home Ownership Week. Fellow and sister martyrs, gathered here today, Christian or non-Christian, you are always welcome in this place, whoever you are. And I pray that today, that through this Eucharist, you are being strengthened to be a greater and more courageous witness by what you say, by your word, and perhaps even in your deeds by what you do to the truth that is expressed here in Jesus Christ. And a bolder and more vocal witness to this church's commitment to justice and peace and dignity with your words, with your deeds, and with the truth that we are all called to proclaim for the good of the world we live in, and for all the people who share in life on this planet.